is anybody even talking about their favorite books of 2024 anymore? So if you're here in the first place, I just want to thank you for that. To keep myself from going on and on and on about all the books that I read last year, I went ahead and picked out my top 10 favorite because that's what I feel like matters. But I also did pick out a few of like my absolute least favorite, like the ones that were just a complete waste of time, potentially overhyped, or maybe I went into it thinking I was going to get something else. This, by the way, is in no particular order, but make sure you grab your coffee, grab your tea, whatever you do to entertain yourself. I'm having decaf coffee. I know it's very pointless. Is it weird that I'm in it just for the taste? The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I had been wanting to read this for a couple of years now, and I actually ended up reading the book If We Were Villains first. Now, I mention that because everybody says that those two books are very, very similar, and they say If We Were Villains is basically like a ripped off version of this one, and so I was like, okay, I want to read both. So if I'm gonna read both, I'm gonna start with the ripped off one. So that way, I just figured this would be the better version. I think both are worth the read, but I did favor this one more. But it's basically about this very small class at this school, and they are studying ancient Greek together. Now, the funny thing about this class is not just anybody can take it. The professor, he's a little bit eccentric. Like, he wants to pick and choose who's allowed to be in his class. And so he ends up finding himself surrounded around people with, I would say, definitely different backgrounds than him. He kind of comes from like a lower class background, and the other ones in the group, whether it be pretentious or pretend or not, they kind of come from like, money, wealth. They are used to the finer things in life. Now, there's really no way to spoil this book because literally on the first page, they tell you somebody dies and they tell you who died. So if you read the first page, you're going to know. And I feel like this book really shows like you are going to look at the world very differently based off of your background, based off of who you surround yourself with. They end up doing some crazy things in this book, which to you and I, you would be like, why would you do that? Like, obviously that doesn't make any sense. But when you surround yourself with people who are either willing to like nod and agree with you, or who think the same way that you do, of course you're going to think that, you're right in whatever path you're deciding to take. So this book is a really good example of that. I don't know. It gets crazy. I feel like you just need to read it, and it's so very well written. I don't want to overhype it too much because I know when people say something's good and then they read it, it makes people not like the book, but I did rate this book a 5-star read for me. So I do want to point out that I am very much a mood reader. I do read different types of books depending on my mood. So continuing in the literary fiction, this is also another dark academia book. This is Bunny by Mona Awad. After reading The Secret History, I had been looking for like another dark academia fix, and this was the perfect one. I feel like I see this book all the time on like those reading lists that are called like weird girl reading lists. So this is about the main character, Samantha. She is actually, again, at a school, obviously, and again, a small classroom. It is made up of her and these group of girls that are referred to as the bunnies. Samantha is one of those really jaded type of characters, as opposed to the bunnies. It's like this group of girls who are like, they kind of seem like very much girls, but girls to each other. Like, maybe not for everybody else, but just like very down for each other. They are kind of like that annoying girl group. It's giving very much Mean Girls, where they're like all in each other's face. So Samantha is forced to be in this writing cohort with them. She doesn't like them, but suddenly she's very interested when they send her an invitation to this meeting that they refer to as Smut Salon. Now, this book has kind of that same theme as The Secret History, as far as the main character, she kind of comes from like an underprivileged background, and she is surrounded by all of these rich girls. So not to read the back, but I didn't want to leave anything important out. Samantha ends up leaving the one friend that she has and becoming a part of the bunnies, and she's kind of diving into their very sick and twisted world. I would say they're very cult-like. I don't want to say too much because I feel like it's better if you go in not knowing too much. That's half of the intrigue in the book, is figuring out what the heck is going on, because when you do, I rated this one also a 5-star read. I'm being very generous. My two favorite genres are definitely leaning between literary fiction and fantasy. For a long time, I was very like literary fic, like since college. But I've come to this age where I've taken a deep interest in fantasy again. And so it took me a really long time to get back into fantasy, because I think I saw that as kind of like a childlike thing for the longest. And so I'm happy to say that I'm back. I had The Hobbit on my list. I had really been wanting to read it because I really wanted to watch the movies. And I was pleasantly surprised. I feel like it's been a really long time since I've read a fantasy book that kind of gave me that feeling that like Harry Potter gave me. The world building in this book was so good. I felt like I got introduced to a new world that I wasn't used to, which was really interesting. And also, I think I really enjoyed it because I found it really relatable. I think hobbits are smaller than dwarves, so it's about like a really small guy. He's very chill, okay? He's very cool with going with the flow, all into slow living. He is a believer in I have everything I need at home, very much a homebody. And I feel like I really related to him in that sense. But of course, nobody's writing a book about a homebody. I had to pause because I just thought about the book My Year of Rest and Relaxation. Anyway, so it follows the character Bilbo, and like I said, he is chilling in his house, enjoying the fine living of being at home, of being comfortable, of being cozy, and along comes this wizard Gandalf. Gandalf approaches him and he's like, hey, I'm looking for somebody to go on this adventure with. There's some treasure that I'm looking to find, and I think you're just the guy to help me with it. And he's like, you cannot be talking to me. Like, does this involve leaving my house? Does this involve danger? Long story short, of course, the Hobbit does end up going on this adventure. He sees more than he has ever seen, more than most of his family has ever seen, because the Hobbits have a long history of all being notorious homebodies. It's just a fun little adventure. It's got goblins, it's got a dragon. I don't know, I felt like this book really brought out my inner child, and that's exactly what I was looking for, so I'm glad that it delivered. And I will be continuing with the rest of the Lord of the Rings series. Don't judge me, okay? These are my favorite books. That is why they are the top 10. So of course there's going to be a lot of 5 stars. This was a 5-star one for me as well. In the Company of Witches by R.L.E. Wallace. So this was definitely a fall read for me. I think I read this in the month of October to get ready for Halloween. The title speaks for it, the book, okay? You're in the company of witches. It definitely reminds me fully of Practical Magic. I know the movie Practical Magic is based off of a book, but I've heard kind of wishy-washy reviews about it, and so I decided to go with this direction since I wanted the Practical Magic vibes in a book for October. And this book delivered. This is what they consider a cozy mystery, so the stakes are not too high. Nothing absolutely crazy is going to happen, but it's still gonna keep you interested. It's a little bit funny, and it's definitely a lot of bit cozy. So I recommend this book for no other time than for October. I think this book was really good for what it was. Of course, it's not anything like super groundbreaking. I gave it a 4.5 stars because it gave me what I was looking for, and I wasn't bored while reading it. And it's also super easy and quick, so definitely a good little October read. So I gave the series A Court of Thorns and Roses a shot a couple of years ago. It took me forever to get through it, and just because actually I really enjoyed it. But I feel like this is an unpopular opinion. This was one of my top reads. Everybody says this is the worst book in the series, and it's also the smallest one. I heard that Sarah J Maas ended up writing this one because like she had to. I think she didn't have time to finish it or something like that. I think something was going on in her life, and so she kind of just threw this one out way shorter than she normally does. But if you read the series, you know that in this land of Fae, by the time they get to a court of frost and starlight, the characters in this book have went through a lot, okay? I won't get too deep into it, but obviously if you started the book or if you're interested, you know there's lots of fighting going on. There's war. It's not always cute castles and flowers and fine Fae men, you know? So I feel like this book was a much needed reprieve from the typical like fighting for our lives theme that was going on in the other books. I feel like it had several little cozy moments in it that just, it made me happy for the characters. I think that's why I enjoyed it. I'm notorious for enjoying books that don't necessarily have a plot. So I feel like this was kind of like that, but I liked it. Now, I didn't love it. I will say my year of 2024 reading list is not my favorite, okay? I think the year before that was probably one of my favorite reading years. I read more of like what I truly have a taste for. I think I took a little bit of an L with that like last year. So I've learned now I don't think book talk is going to be my thing, but a few of them have been hits, so I'm grateful for that. The ACOTAR series, I think it's a good, like, little fluffy read. When you want to do, like, some mindless reading, you don't want to think too hard, you kind of just want to escape and have fun. I feel like that's when that book series is a fun thing, you know? I just don't take myself too seriously. Like, I love my literary fiction because I do like to explore, like, how other people think. But sometimes this world is just so serious, and sometimes I want to read something very unserious, you know, like give me some fairies at this point because I'm exhausted. I rated A Court of Frost and Starlight 3.5 stars. Okay, so we have made it to the category of romance. Now I'm gonna tell you, I think this was my heaviest romance reading year yet, and don't fight me, please. That might be why I didn't enjoy the reading year. Now, don't get me wrong. I love a love story, okay? I love in my literary fiction books when there's somebody in love. I think it's called contemporary romance. I don't think I'm big on those. And the reason being is I just feel like I don't like books that are very predictable, and not even like in a cozy way, like In the Company of Witches. Like, it's just like this storyline is it's all been said, it's all been done. And I didn't realize this until somebody pointed it out. I really don't like when we go into the romance books and people are like, this is an enemies to lovers book, and I'm like, well, thanks a lot. I now know who the main character is going to end up with. It could just be how the books are being talked about. I don't know. I sound like a hater. Oh my god. But alas, I did come across a few romance books that I did enjoy, but I do want to give a disclaimer. I typically read them in audiobook form, which may or may not be reading. So the first one that I really enjoyed from last year was This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan. Not only was it a romance, I feel like we were really being shown a character going through trials and tribulations and overcoming. This is one of those book series where it follows like a group of people in the same universe. So the first book was Before I Let Go, following the main character Yasmin. And in that book, one of her friends was Soledad. And you kind of see in the first book, when they're meeting up for brunch, you hear Soledad kind of hint at the fact that her man ain't shit. But in her actual dedicated book, you get to see like why, what's going on. I mean, it's kind of obvious in the first one. This woman, she is a mother. She has been sold the American dream. Even though she went to school, she has got her degree. She kind of is relying like on her husband to take care of the household, which is not a problem, but like as this book shows, like it can become a problem if you're not with the right person. She ends up finding herself basically having to take care of herself and take care of her, I think she has 3 daughters, like completely alone. This man cannot be involved, okay? You will see why. Yeah, you just end up rooting for her. She's really getting it out of the mud, if you will. I like a romance that has a little meat to it. Just don't give me like these roses and daisies and I know what's gonna happen next. Like, give me some trials and tribulations. I ended up rating This Could Be Us as a 5-star read. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm back. Obviously, I left. This is a whole nother day. I'm just gonna finish it today. Whole nother outfit, but we move on. So next in my romance category, I had Funny Story by Emily Henry. Now let me tell you, I had read an Emily Henry book before, a physical copy, and I think it was the one called Beach Read. It was super hyped up, super crazed about. It took me a lot to get through that book, and I kind of swore like I was never gonna read another Emily Henry book. And then it was recommended to me by someone whose book taste I trust. She recommended reading or listening to the audiobook version of Funny Story. So I specifically did that, not expecting too much because like I said, I hated Beach Read with a passion. And honestly, a lot of times, like if somebody says something is going to be funny, it's just not that funny to me. I was listening to that audiobook and I will tell you, I audibly laughed like several times. I will say, if you're looking for like a really mushy gushy type of love story, type of romance, I wouldn't say that is the storyline. I think of it as more of like an entertaining listen. I don't even want to say a read because I will say the narrator who read this book, she ate it up. Like I almost feel like, I don't want to say the book is not good if you physically read it because I didn't, but I will say I think the narrator herself added a little extra something to it. And so that's the only way I recommend the book because that was my experience. Now, is the book super unrealistic, like the scenario that happens? Yes, it is unrealistic. But I'm one of those people when I go into reading, I'm not going into fictional books with the hopes that it will be realistic. That's what nonfiction is for, in my eyes, okay? I'm just not one of those people where I'm like, there were plot holes or this would never happen. It's a book. It's a fictional book. Things are gonna happen that probably would not happen in real life. Sometimes the point of me reading fiction is just simply I want to escape. And if I'm focusing too much on the details and plot holes and whether or not this would happen in real life, I'm not escaping. I'm clearly staying put. I will say there's some nuance to that, but with this story, I don't know. I think it's worth the read if you're looking for a fun, funny, quirky little read. There also was not a crazy amount of spice, which I appreciate. I'm kind of a spice hater for reasons we may uncover one day. So I ended up rating this book a 5-star. One thing you should know about me, I'm going to rate a book based off of what it is. And for what this book was, I felt like it was fresh. I felt like it was indeed funny. It was a fun read. It's kind of hard to have me read a romance book and not go like, that was corny. And so like, I felt like it deserved 5 stars. So I gave it 5 stars. Okay, I'm sorry. Apparently I had an ignorant moment and I put this book under romance. I'd hardly call this a romance. It's heavy fantasy facing, okay? So I should have put this under fantasy, but I don't want to confuse you and just edit it that way since I'm wearing a different sweater. So we'll go ahead and do it now. But the book Legendborn. So I actually listened to this on audiobook. I typically do that when I'm not sure how I'm going to feel about a book. Not sure if I want to commit my full attention to it. So I kind of use it as like what I listen to when I'm in the shower washing my hair. I'll go ahead and tell you right now, I should have physically read Legendborn. So Legendborn actually follows this girl. I want to say she's like 16 years old in the story, but she's supposed to be in college. I think that's really my only like nitpick with this story. I'm like, why does everybody always have to be young? And dang, like you couldn't at least make her college age. If there are suggestive sentences, which there are not in this book, but the next book, it makes me a little uncomfortable when the main character is underage. Even though I know good and well that 16-year-olds are speaking like this. That's just how I am. I don't know. It's the old Lady Jordan inside of me. But it follows this girl named Bree. She has just found herself in college, the college that her mom went to, in fact, who unfortunately did pass away right before she ended up going to this school. Now, she's actually feeling pretty guilty about even going because her mom specifically told her, like, I really don't want you going to this school. But she decided to go anyway, probably to feel closer to her mom, and that she did get, but maybe not in the way that she was expecting. So this is not a spoiler. I don't like to do spoilers. She has powers that she has received from her specific bloodline on her mother's side. I personally am not used to reading about King Arthur and the Round Table, and that's kind of what this fantasy story surrounds. As she is attending this school, she's starting to figure out like there's something really fishy going on. She's seeing things that other people seem to not be seeing. So she finds a way to get closer to this secret society that at the end of the day, they serve King Arthur. So there's lots of magic going on. I ended up reading the second book physically and absolutely loved it. I think I would have liked the first book even more if I would have read it physically. So I do recommend that because Tracy Deonn, she does a wonderful job at writing this story. She's a great writer. Maybe I haven't read enough fantasy, but I just feel like that's kind of like a rare trait when I read fantasy. Like sometimes I have to just be there for the story alone because the writing may not be that great. But Tracy Deonn, she's a great writer. But it was really nice to read a fantasy book with somebody who kind of looks like me. I feel like even in the little small details where she's talking about she has to be ready to go fight, but she hasn't done her hair yet. So it was just really cute to me to see those little details because I didn't grow up reading books where those little details are in there. So I actually ended up rating Legendborn by Tracy Deonn a 5-star read. Okay, back on track on the romance train. Love in Other Words. And this is another book that I felt like actually would have been worth my while reading physically. I might actually go buy the physical copy. So it's written by Christina Lauren, which is not one person, it's actually 2 women. And I've read another book by them, but it really just did not compare to this book, like at all. I don't know. I might just be a crier. Like I'm a happy crier. I'm a sad crier. If there's something to cry about, I'm going to cry. This book had me crying via audiobook. And I'm like, that's kind of weird. I feel like the sad moments, they were also like very sweet and really tender. Like they really hit me right here. It follows the main character, Macy, and she is dealing with grief at the moment. And I want to say both of her parents at this point have passed away. I say that because she does kind of do flashbacks where you will see her father in her life. But she's trying to navigate through life of not having them anymore. She's going through that point in life where she's really trying to settle down. She has a new job. She's trying to get settled into that, and she also is in a relationship with this man who she thinks to be who she's going to end up with because he seems like the ideal person for her. He's got money to take care of her, to take care of them, even though she can take care of herself as well. He's financially secure. And then everything gets rocked when her childhood sweetheart ends up bumping into her. She has like mixed feelings about this. Like, of course, she's excited to see him. The love that they used to share runs really deep, and their story will be shared throughout the book, but you really won't get their full story until the very end of the book. To keep it short, quick, and sweet, they have a really sweet kind of teenage romance. I think this is her first love, and just the details of it. I feel like this is the perfect book for anybody, obviously, who is a book lover. That is kind of like their happy place together, their little meeting ground. They kind of show each other love through reading books and also through words, hence the title, Love in Other Words. So I feel like that really just added to it so much. I feel like there's not many books that I read where I'm like, this is actually kind of romantic. Like, what? I definitely recommend. I rated this one a 4 out of 5 stars. Okay, so we've gotten to the portion of this video where it's time for me to talk about 3 of the worst books that I read last year. And I think I mentioned already in this video, this was not a great reading year for me. I was experimenting heavily. I feel like I wasn't really reading things that I naturally would be interested in. It was a lot of like, you know, taking the advice of others, like trying to branch out, trying to give things a chance. And I really, you know, when they say you really should just stick to what you were going to do before, we live, we learn, we move on, and I'm moving on in 2025. Honestly, I feel like I used to always get all my book recommendations from Pinterest, and dare I say Pinterest has done a better job at figuring out my book taste. That's where I've been getting my book recommendations, I would say, since like 2016 probably. But we've got to start with the first worst book that I read last year, and that was A Touch of Darkness. I forgot the name of the author. It doesn't matter. I will insert. I feel like that sounded really disrespectful. Sorry, author. I just did not like this specific book. So I really should have known better. A friend of mine from book club let me borrow it, and she didn't like the book herself, but this is why I ended up reading it anyway. She didn't finish it, and she was like, you might like this because I know you like Greek mythology centered books. Like, I loved the Song of Achilles. I was looking for like more. I was looking for more of a fix. It's centered around Persephone and Hades, but they make it more modern. And I think that's part of what I did not like. When it comes to things like that, I'm an old school girl. I don't want to see the modern day version of the thing. And I think I learned that from reading this book. Also, I do want to give a disclaimer. I think this is considered a young adult book, and I did not realize that until I started reading it. And at that point, I was like, well, let me see if it's good, because I heard a lot about it. That book is very young adult. I'm one of those people, I don't know why I torture myself. A lot of times I will finish it anyway, just to see if there's a glimmer of the hope that everybody said it was really good. Yeah, girl, I don't even know why I put this on this list. You're not gonna read that book, but if you were thinking of it, don't. So I rated that a 2 star. Honestly, that's generous. I think I only gave it 2 stars because I finished it. So really, you could give it 1. I might get hate for this, I don't know. But Fourth Wing, I don't know how this book is as popular as it is. So I listened to it on audiobook because, again, it was a book that I was unsure about. It took me so long to finish it. And that's with me like doing other things while listening to the book. Took me forever because I just really was not interested. And so I heard people talking about the second book. So I was like, you know what? I'm the person, I'm going to give it a chance because I really wanted to dive into this world. I was really big on dragon books when I was in middle school. And so I was like, you know, I would love a dragon book for like my grown 27-year-old self. This is not the dragon book for me. I just feel like the storyline has a lot of potential for sure. But I feel like the world building in the first and the second book is just really not good. Like, when I read a fantasy book, I really want to feel like I'm just being uprooted from my apartment and I'm popping up into this world. And I just don't feel like that when I read any of Fourth Wing or Iron Flame. And sometimes I will say, like, when I listen to something on audiobook, it'll make it hard to follow. And so sometimes that's why I may not like it. This was not the case. I feel like this book is really easy to read and really easy to follow, to the point like where I am noticing I'm picking out things like that doesn't make any sense. And honestly, the main character, Violet, she was insufferable. I don't think I'm gonna finish the second book on audiobook, even though I paid my good money on Audible. I don't think I can do it, because I think I have like 15 hours left, and there's so many other things that I could be reading or listening to with 15 hours. Also, the love interest, for me, it really didn't click. I was listening to that book like, am I supposed to be attracted to this man? Both of the main characters got on my nerves, to be honest. At the time, I rated that a 3 because I was giving the next one a chance. So I was giving it like an average rating, like could use some work, could use some building onto. Okay, I feel like this next one could also be really confusing for people, and they would be like, why did you not like this book? And I'm going to explain to you why I was not a big fan of The Haunting of Hill House. Now, I normally don't do this. I normally always read the book before I watch the show, because a lot of the times the book is better than the show. As someone who loves scary content, the Netflix show that they made for The Haunting of Hill House was really good, and I typically don't like to let a book go unseen if I've seen a show. I went ahead and picked up the book and finally read it. Now, I will say it's not a bad book. I was upset and very disappointed with the book is because it's called The Haunting of Hill House, and Netflix made a show about it like it was gonna be some super scary book. I don't want to give anything away, so I feel like I can't say a lot about it just in case you want to read it, but I will say it wasn't even creepy. In fact, I would say it was beautifully written. There were times where I was like, this sounds like a pleasant place to be. Maybe not on the inside of the house, but like the outside of the house when they were dilly-dallying around. I was like, this sounds like a nice place to be. Now, I will say we do have to consider the time period that this book was written. Okay, so this book was first published in the year 1959. That's very telling as far as scary goes. I feel like nowadays we are very edgy when it comes to horror. Like, what was scary then was more like about the suggestiveness and alluding to scary. The show just hyped me up too much. I shouldn't have watched it first, and maybe I would have liked this more. I'm ashamed to say that. I wish somebody would have told me that it's basically a completely different story than what you're going to get in the show, and I think this would have went over a lot better. So I ended up rating this one just an average 3 out of 5 stars. And that concludes my top 10 books for the year 2024. I want to say I read about like 35 books, maybe a few more. I hope to read more, of course, this year, especially with making this channel. I feel like it will allow me more time to read. Honestly, that was kind of the reason I did it. I was like, an excuse to read more. Yes, please add it to my morning routine, and I read before I go to bed, but I feel guilty when I read in the middle of the day, you know? So maybe having this channel will make me feel less guilty. I'm gonna go ahead and close out this video here. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, of course, I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching my first ever booktube video. Goodbye!